and a mic.
Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Pace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guests, two-time UCLA Basketball Champion,
John Vallely.
My brother Frankie, how are you, pal? How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Our guest today is John Vallely, two-time All-American at UCLA, a national champion, teammate of Kareem Abdul Jabbar. He should be a fine guest.
Great volleyball player, too.
He was.
Fantastic.
He was.
Played against Walter Stilt.
He did.
And played with Walter Stilt.
He did.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
That reminds me, did you watch the basketball game this week or not?
Yeah, I watched the championship game. I always watch the Final Four, but I didn't catch it. But I did watch the championship game.
What was the spread?
Oh, they're amazing. 4. 4 was the line, and they won by 3.
And the over and under?
Oh, right on the money. It was like
148?
140. Whatever it was a half a point. They missed it by a point.
Missed it by a half.
Depending on whether you're over.
Unbelievable.
I don't know how they do it. And you know what gets me? They get the half times, too. If you look at the halftime spreads, they're right on the money. It's always like the last shot. I tell you, they should let bookmakers run this bloody country.
They already do.
Yeah, probably. Probably. But you think we'd have a deficit if the bookies ran the country? No. Forget it.
Well, as quickly as they give away money.
We had a Supreme Court nominee. Can we talk about this?
Sure. Why can't we?
Well, I don't know.
It's our show.
We can do anything we want.
Absolutely.
Let me show you something.
I can't
It
say
ain't much to see. The only guy in the room who can run into a wall with a hard on and break his nose. My longest appendage, people. I'm very proud of it. But yeah, so I mean, they had a Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown, right?
Yep.
She got right? You know what's remarkable? You saw the questions that they were asking her. I mean, it was ridiculous. It's become so polarized. It's so crazy. You know what I find interesting, and I don't know how many people know this, but the Supreme Court, you know what qualifications you have to be?
None.
Absolutely none.
We've done this before.
Yeah, none. Absolutely none. And they were an afterthought.
You don't have to even be an attorney.
No, none at all. I could nominate, well, I couldn't, but a president could nominate you to be a Supreme Court justice.
Right. But you know what I think? Interesting thing, the vote was 53-47. Of the 3 Republicans that broke, one of them was Mitt Romney.
Right.
I believe Mitt Romney's setting himself up to run for president again. Because he's courting the middle-of-the-road Republican people, and he just might get them.
Well, we're so skewed now in politics that, I mean, look at Biden. Biden was a political windsock.
I know.
I mean, both sides of the aisle. He played it that way, and people wanted a political windsock after what's been going on.
And I'm sure his son is guilty of all sorts of improprieties.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Look at Derek, our third man in the booth, Derek Harris, is laughing hysterically. I'm sure he's guilty of all sorts of improprieties, never thinking that his father would become president of the United States.
Without a doubt. But could you handle Romney right now? I could handle Romney. I mean, at least he's...
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden he don't look that bad.
I mean, having met him in person...
Have you?
You would hate him. He's the single most boring person. He's more boring than Joe Biden.
Wow.
And he's less genuine. I mean,
he's less genuine than Biden.
Of course, because he was running a big hedge fund.
Right.
So
corporations are people, my friend.
You know he's dirty. Yeah. But, like you said, you could handle Romney now.
I could.
So if it came to Romney or Trump, I think Romney's got a good shot. If it came to Romney or that woman in Wyoming or Montana or whatever Governor Noem is, or whatever the person in South Carolina is,
I think people are delighted just to have somebody rational. It's gone beyond whether or not they have...
Romney's not rational, but...
He's got magic underwear.
Yeah, he's got magic underwear. He's got magic underwear. So what story were you going to tell me?
Let me just finish up on the Supreme Court thing. The Supreme Court was an afterthought. Article 3 of the Constitution, Marbury versus Madison in 1803 was John Marshall usurping power for the Supreme Court. That's where the Supreme Court got all its power. It gave them judicial review, he called it, which was, that's where they got all the power from. Realistically, they shouldn't have the power they have. But forget about that. I got to tell you, Derek,
Frank.
I know who you are. Remember how I told you that they're listening? I don't know who they is. They're listening. But this is the clincher. This happened to me 2 days ago. I'm always making jokes about having gone ass. I got no ass.
Right.
Like my pants don't stay up. All my life, I had the GAs. My friends, even in grammar school, you say you got the GAs. What the GA, gone ass. I started getting, and I never put this on any internet or nothing like that. Just talked about
belts or suspenders?
Suspenders. I started getting all these ads for suspenders. I said, look at this shit. Look at this.
So many people now are watching these podcasts. It would be easy for anybody to
get
that inference that you got the gone ass and send you some suspenders.
So you think somebody listening to a podcast is going to tip somebody? No, they're listening to it. Somebody's listening. Listen, corporations, the government, I don't know who it is, but they're definitely listening because there's no way I start seeing all these ads. Everything pops up, suspenders. And I started laughing.
Well, you're going to get
they ain't listening.
Goneass.com is sending you suspenders.
Goneass.com.
By the way, we should check that and see if that site is site is available. We can put it up on our website and sell suspenders to people with gone asses.
That's a good rap name too, Frank. Goneass, the rapper.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think that could be my rap name, Derek?
I
don't know if I ever want to go that route.
You're going to be DJ Bougie Billy.
Boozy.
DJ Like a Booty Billy. How about Like a Booty? That has a ring to it. Like a Booty Billy.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me the story.
Huh?
Tell me the story you're going to tell me.
That is the story.
That's the story?
Yeah, suspenders. I couldn't believe it.
Oh.
What? You want a punchline? Ain't no punchline.
Then let's get to our guest, John Vallely.
Oh, yeah, man. It's going to be an interesting interview.
Yeah,
looking forward to meeting John.
Derek, can you bring in our guest, John Vallely?
Okay, we'll get John up.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Frank.
That's my partner, Billy O'Connor, and that's my friend, Derek Harris, on the console. Welcome.
Hey, Billy and Derek. Good morning.
Good morning to you, John. Pleasure to have you on, pal. Really nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you. Pleasure.
So I'll start you off with, did you see the NCAA tournament this week?
Yes, I did.
And what was your take on it?
Well, the game has changed with a 3-point line. We used to go inside out. We get something into an artist and they did a little bit of it with Kansas with the big guy in the middle. And then we would move it out when people doubled him or tripled him and that kind of thing. We ran a high post offense during my second year at UCLA that opened up the play for everybody. The work around the perimeter is certainly different. It's amazing how such big guys can actually shoot those shots and make them from the 3-point line, because in my day, there weren't many 7-footers that could shoot from that distance. I like watching the defense. It was fun to watch. And I thought there were some great games. I watched the Sweet 16 forward. I thought the Sweet 16 was the most interesting. I think I actually watched 8 hours one day.
Wow.
And I love watching super competitive games. And certainly the final was that way.
You played in 2 NCAA championships teams. You played in 1969 with Lew Alcindor / Kareem Abdul Jabbar, and then you played in the 1970 game against Jacksonville with a whole new cast of characters. Just about. How did the 2 teams differ? Well,
with Lew Alcindor, obviously the game, our offense revolved around him. We pressed all over the court, and he was the last man standing at the back end of the court. So if somebody got past the zone press that we used to run, they'd run into Lew Alcindor, and that's not much fun. And so that part of it was different. During my senior year, Sidney Wicks's junior year, Sidney was the guy who was in back, but we had Curtis Rowe that was off the 69 team and on the 70 team as well. And with Sidney Wicks added and Henry Bibby, and Steve Patterson. Steve Patterson played against Lew Alcindor every day in practice, and finally got to take that starting role as a high post offensive player. And so very different teams. The 69 team was one that was stacked up with Lew Alcindor. And I really got into using the pyramid of success in my life in the second year, the 70 team. I was captain. We weren't expected to win. Artis Gilmore and friends were out there on the East Coast building a great team as well. And there were many other great teams, including Kentucky and others. But I just think it was a time for me to realize that all I could do was control what I could control, even though that's true in 69. In 70, I realized that I have to take it off my head, off my forehead, off my mental take, and just enjoy accomplishing what I could do for the team. And so we did, and darned if we didn't follow the pyramid of success. Had a couple challenging events during the year, and we ended up winning the championship.
Why don't you talk about some of those challenging events during the year?
Well,
and this is the 69-70 season, correct?
Yes, we won in 70. This is that second year. I was scoring too many points, according to a couple of my teammates, and after we lost a game in Oregon with Stan Love's. He was the great center up there in Oregon. A couple of the guys were concerned that I was scoring too much. I was averaging, I think, 19 a game or something. Sidney Wicks was averaging 15, and they didn't like it that I was leading the team in scoring. So Henry Bibby, it's funny, I'll tell you the rest of the story in a moment, but it's really good. He came to me with another guy and said, the black guys are concerned that with so many great black players on the team, that we have a white guy leading the team in scoring. So I had to do something about that. I could go to Coach Wooden, which he would just have a fit. I could go to Sidney, which I believe is maybe where it came from. Or I could just be quiet, try to do a jump stop and pivot and dump it inside somehow and take a couple less shots. Well, what happened is my scoring went from 19 to, I think it was 16, and Sidney's went from 15 to 18 or 19. And guess what? There wasn't another word said about that event that took place after the game, the loss in Oregon, and we won the championship. Now, upon Coach Wooden's death, we had a large memorial service in Poly Pavilion, and after the service, Henry Bibby came up to me. Now, this is, 45 years later? I can't remember exactly what year Coach passed, but it was years ago. But he came up to me at the memorial service, and he tapped me on the hip, and he says, "Hey, John, we can't have a white guy leading the team in scoring." Henry had coached for 30 years or something, or in the NBA. Can you imagine the amount of stories that he could remember? But he remembered that one, and so we both had a really good laugh, and we had a great time together at UCLA. He was a great shooter. I was a good shooter, and the high post offense really developed great opportunities for me to play and for him to play from the outside, and we had a good time together that day.
Well, you talk about a white guy leading the team in scoring. In the semifinal game in 69 versus Drake, you outscored Kareem. You were the leading scorer in the game with 29 points, and I believe Kareem had 27. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, Frank, I do remember that, because from time to time when I've been introduced along with Kareem, I tease him that, he was trying to win his third national championship, in a row, which had never been done before. And there I was scoring 29 points and he scored 25. So my remark is, Kareem, you would have never become anything if it wasn't for me.
You said that you could have taken that complaint about the white guy scoring too much to Wooden, but he would have went bananas. Can you elaborate on that a little more? Like he would have said, doesn't matter who's scoring, or just win.
Billy, you're right on with the question, and you're actually answering the question. Coach would have disregarded that type of thinking. He never looked at people in the way that color mattered. But I think because of the social times that we were in the late 60s and early 70s, that, and of course now too, that we're still going through this situation, I think he would have straightened everybody up on the matter in just a paragraph or less. And if there was another thing about it, there would have been trouble, big trouble. It didn't make any difference. He took the best players he could have and put them on the court. His job was to coach us, and our job was to play the game and give it our all. He was far more concerned about effort, and if there was an issue with one guy scoring too much, he would take care of it, and he would do it on the sideline, not in front of anybody else.
Is it true that he never mentioned the word win?
He mentioned the word win on the first day that we gathered as a team in a small room where he wanted to discuss the goals of the year and explain to us his way of thinking about finding our best effort to learn about competitive greatness. And he said, everybody wants to win. Who doesn't want to win? And he said, but that, I don't believe, should be our goal. It could be the result of what we do, but the goal is to find our own competitive greatness, which is to be the best we can be when our best is needed. And he said, I ask each of you to consider this way of thinking, that if we can find peace about our effort to be the best that we can be, then we don't need to worry about the results. They will take care of themselves. Peace, meaning absence of conflict. Absence of conflict in your mind and your heart about your effort. If we can achieve that, then I think we'll be happy with the results, he said. So, winning and losing were only stated in that very beginning and never again. Each year, he made a similar speech.
That's almost like an Eastern philosophy, it seems to me, like, this idea of peace. And did he ever lose his temper? Have you ever seen him lose his temper? Was he soft-spoken? Or?
Yes, I have seen him lose his temper. It was in my junior year, Lew Alcindor's senior year, and a nice guy named Bill Sweek was on our team. Coach, I think it was in the semifinal. Yeah, it was the semifinal when I had that big scoring game. And Bill was a backup guard at that time, good player, had been at UCLA for 5 years. And it was his time to play. Well, we got into the latter half, I believe, of the second half. I think I fouled out with about 2 or 3 minutes to go. And Coach had to put a guard in, and he put a guard in other than Bill. And Bill just had a cow. So at some point, I think Bill was asked to go into the game late, and he simply stood up, left the bench, and went into the locker room. It was there that Coach, after that semifinal game, walked in and read the riot act to Sweek. I remember coming in as one of the players and hearing this confrontation taking place in the shower. Sweek was in the shower. Coach had walked in and went and gave him so much of his mind.
Without ever using a curse word.
I don't know, because I wasn't there for the entire time. He was pretty funny how he did different things. He would call us out at different times. One time, he put me at point guard in practice to see if I could do that. Put Henry Bibby on the side just to change up the relationship there. And we went against the zone, and I think I threw the ball away 2 times in a row. Well, Coach had gone up into the top of the Poly Pavilion to take a look and see what the team looked like from up there. Of course, we didn't see where he went. He would just simply leave the floor and then go climb the stairs and go up there. Well, when I threw the ball away 2 times, I heard him walk down. First, we could see him walk down the steps then. And he goes, John, pass the ball to somebody on your own team.
Well, he used to be really good, I believe, at razzing the opposing players, but he would do it through that folded up, or the rolled up program that he always had near his side. Is that true?
He was probably as competitive a person as you would ever meet. And he didn't want to distract from the game as far as the people behind the bench. But what went on in front of the bench with officials and with opposing players was a different thing. He would tease, and of course, when he teased, you'd have players that were maybe listening to too much. John Wooden is saying these things, and if he could razz somebody, he did.
Wow, you got the nickname from Wooden, Mr. Money. And before you came on, Frank had said to me, he said, I think that John today could probably go into a big show and with absolutely no pressure on him. Do you feel like you were like relieved of some of that pressure because of the pyramid of success and because of this Eastern philosophy type thing? Or, it's in a higher power, higher hands than mine.
Well, Billy, that's a great question because, as a 19-year-old who's learning about the pyramid of success, looking at the 15 characteristics in that document, industriousness, enthusiasm, loyalty, cooperation, friendship, intentness, initiative, poise, confidence, building the skills, teamwork, eagerness to sacrifice personal interest for the glory of the team, became one of the most valuable things in my life as far as my marriage, as far as my parental responsibility. I created a culture from that document in my business, especially the retail store that we had in Newport Beach that was very successful. People loved it. They loved the idea of creating this special culture. Well, anyway, when I married and my wife gave birth to 2 children, 3 years apart, is about the time of the second birth that I started to go through the spiritual thing. I said, something's missing. Can it be just competitive greatness? Can it just be the best you can be and it's over? Well, anyway, after a year of study and consideration, I asked God into my life. And so when you think about that Eastern philosophy of finding some higher power, yes, I went through that too.
Well, it definitely would be something I would imagine. I mean, never being competitive at all, especially at your level, but I would imagine that would take a lot of the pressure off. Like the shot's not really mine, it's in somebody else's hands, and it is what it is.
Really, exactly as you say. You do what you can control, what you can control. You do what you can do. Don't worry about the results. Now, in business, I did the exact same thing. I did the exact same thing in marriage. Do the best that you can do to become the best partner you can be. And some of the guys didn't adopt this philosophy after they got through the education at UCLA. I found it a huge asset in my business, in decision making, and fighting the Bank of America on a huge lawsuit, and winning only at the upper level in appeals. Coach Wooden used to say, surround yourself with people and ideas that you respect. And so, Billy, when you focus on that maybe it's a harmony that goes on in your mind with God as to who you are. It doesn't mean you're not going to miss a free throw or miss a jump shot, but all you can do is give your best effort. He always would tell us there's always going to be someone taller, someone shorter, someone faster, someone slower, and someone smarter than you and someone not as smart as you. But find your gift, do what you can do. Now, after he would teach all this stuff, Billy, he'd say to everybody in the room, this is just something I developed over 14 years, and I found it really useful, particularly in my English classes, my academic classes that I was teaching. But it's such a great tool to use. If you've got something better, I encourage you to use that.
Yeah.
So he didn't dictate, you have to do my mental approach.
He developed it over 14 years.
Yes.
The pyramid of success. And he was also a great basketball player at Purdue, an All-American. Did you know that, Billy?
No, I didn't know that.
Yep.
And Wooden was below 6 feet, right? He wasn't a tall man, was he?
He's like 5'9", 5'9", right around there. And he shot underhanded. He shot two-handed. He actually was a very good shooter from short range. But, when you get older, the legs go away, so you lose a little power. But I imagine that he was incredibly quick.
Yeah.
Wow.
And incredibly intelligent on the court.
John, let me ask you, why did you go to Orange Coast College right out of high school instead of going directly to UCLA?
I wasn't invited to go to UCLA. I was invited to go by Bob Boyd, the coach at USC. He said if I would go to junior college and try to, play there, get my grades up. I came out of high school with a solid C+ grade point average and a jump shot, so there was plenty of improvement to take place. And so I think Nebraska was interested in me, and I got a picture of the arena with all the blown snow in front of it.
Yeah, for a beach boy like you, no way.
Wait a minute, little beach rat from Balboa Island travel to Nebraska and travel through the blowing snow. And even though Stu Lance, who eventually became a teammate of mine when I played for the Houston Rockets, but Stu was there and he was quite a great player, just ahead of my time there. Anyway, I can't remember who else, but if I could go to Orange Coast, have some good years there. I knew there were 4 or 5 other good players coming into Orange Coast. If I could go there and play well, perhaps more opportunity would come, and that's exactly what happened. So Bob Boyd really said, go ahead and play a year at Orange Coast. I'll pick you up after that first year. And then he came to me after that first year, and he says, John, go another year at Orange Coast. I'll pick you up after the second year. Well, in the meantime, Jerry Norman became interested in me at UCLA. We happened to go up and play, our JC team went up and played the freshman team at UCLA. Curtis Rowe was on that UCLA team. Let's see who else was on that team. Steve Patterson, I guess, was on that team.
Andy
Hill? Andy was on that team. No, Andy was younger than me. He wasn't there yet. He was a year or 2 younger than me. And we went up there and had a good game. We lost to the UCLA team, but I think I scored something like 30 or 35 points. And so they saw that I could shoot, and they knew that Lew Alcindor, they were going to lose Mike Warren and Lucius Allen, so they needed to have somebody who could shoot a ball, and they thought maybe I would fit in, even though I had been playing forward at that point. I wasn't dribbling the ball up and down the court as would be needed at UCLA. But they invited me, and then I thought, well, what the heck? How will I ever know if I could fit into such a program like that unless I tried? And of course, my college coach at Orange Coast said, John, why don't you go someplace where you're sure you could play? It would be a better experience for you. My mother wondered if I was fast enough, which was questionable. And with that, I decided to go to UCLA to find out. And I started out the 5th guard amongst all these guys that had been there for several years and worked my way up.
So let me ask you, just occurred to me, was Paul Westphal at USC at that time? Because I think during those years, UCLA was number 1, but USC was in the top 5. But in order to qualify, you had to win the conference because only 16 teams and play-ins, so 24 teams went to the tournament that year. Did you play against Westphal? And had you played against Westphal, if you had become a teammate of Westphal, do you think the competitive balance would have switched to USC?
That would be a stretch for me to consider, I guess, because our front line was, when you got people like Sidney Wicks and Curtis Rowe, although they had a guy named Riley that was a really good player at SC. Actually, Paul was highly recruited to UCLA the year that I came in. If Paul had come in the year that I came in, he would have come in. And maybe I never got to play, or it would have been a battle between Paul and Henry and myself for starting guard positions.
Wow.
But Paul didn't like Sidney Wicks. He'd played against Sidney in quite a few pickup games and different events, and just he didn't like their boastful nature. Both Sidney and Curtis were kind of Hollywood-like. They had a lot of fun being who they were at the time, and so Paul decided to go to USC.
Wow. How?
Paul and I became good friends over the years, and I sure miss him.
Yeah, he was a good guy. Good guy.
Good guy.
He
Very good guy.
and then he became a great coach at Phoenix as well.
Oh yeah. Paul had a great career. I mean, fantastic athlete.
So what was it like coming out of Orange Coast College and walking on a court with Lew Alcindor, Lynn Shackelford, Kenny Heights, Mike Warren, all those great players, a two-time national champion? What was it like for you?
Mike Warren had already graduated. He was a senior on the team before I got there. The rest of the fellows you mentioned were there. And I walked out there and simply had the responsibility to give it my all. And what was it like? I mean, we didn't even get on the court when it became really strange. When Coach had us in that meeting, when he was telling us about the Pyramid of Success, started out by telling us to take our socks and shoes off. And I'll never forget sitting in the room with Lew Alcindor, 2 people away. And of course, I was in awe of his ability and his size and what he could do on the basketball court, his legendary status at that point. And in walks Coach Wooden. The first thing he says is, take your socks and shoes off. I want to show you how to put on your socks and shoes. And Lew Alcindor says, come on, Coach, not the sock story again. This is Lew Alcindor's 4th year to learn how to put on a pair of socks and shoes. Coach says to Lew Alcindor, Lew, you pay attention. And so he continued, and we all took our socks and shoes off. He says, I want you to pull the socks up in a way that there's no wrinkle in that sock. You make sure that the seam is in the right place. I don't want one of you to get a blister as a result of not knowing how to put on your socks properly and shoes. I don't want one of you to have downtime on my basketball team as a result of something we didn't cover in the details.
Amazing. That's an amazing story.
So that foundation, Billy, I think is really important because I've used it in the talks I've done over the years as a beginning to how you have to have a foundation in the pyramid of success, the industriousness, the enthusiasm, loyalty, friendship, all the things that are in the pyramid, the characteristics that make us up as a human being are foundational to the good life experience. It's also foundational to cover all the details to make your best basketball team. His job was to make the best team. He couldn't control he could control by shipping people in and out of the game, but the players are the ones who win the championships. And he always admitted that. It wasn't so much about him. It was more about the players that they had.
He hated the nickname Wizard of Westwood, didn't he?
You got some good stuff here, Frank. One time we were speaking at an engagement down here in Newport for the Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation, which I sit on the board of, and I do a thing called Dribble for the Cure that's become a nice fundraiser.
With Jerry Wilson, with my friend Jerry Wilson.
Oh, you know Jerry well. Okay, good. Yeah, Jerry's just awesome. She's our executive director now, and she's been here for about 10 years. She's done a terrific job. I've been on the board for about 40 years now. And the Wizard of Westwood, I invited Coach to come down and to one of our pediatric cancer group meetings. It was actually a dinner, a formal dinner event. And Coach and I would sit on the floor of this event, and we would have a conversation. Well, afterwards, I took him home, and we got up to the back of his condominium up in the Valley, and we were up to the gate where you had to open the gate, and he was fumbling around and couldn't get the gate open so I could drive him in to take him home. And I said, come on, Coach. Come on, you're supposed to be the Wizard of Westwood, and you can't get into your own home? He said, John, don't you call me the Wizard of Westwood. He actually was kind of upset, and it was pretty funny because I was just going after him at that point, And it's just a cackle. It's good.
Yeah.
I love the attention to detail that, the preparation being, the key to success. I remember reading about Lincoln. He said if he had 8 hours to cut down a tree, he'd spend 6 hours sharpening his axe.
Well, Lincoln was one of Coach Wooden's role models, wasn't he? Lincoln and Mother Teresa?
Yeah. Lincoln is the one who taught Coach, who taught me about the comment. It's quote, surround yourself with people and ideas that you respect. Imagine Lincoln doing that in the day.
Wow.
When he was going through the Civil War and all the things that were going on in those days. Lincoln was a role model for Coach Wooden. And then, of course, his father, Joshua Wooden, was a great man too. And it's the other two, these are the two quotes that Coach taught me that made such a big difference. Never try to be better than someone else, but never cease trying to be the best that you can be. Again, there'll always be someone smarter, someone not as smart, someone taller, faster. That is irrelevant. And Joshua Wooden taught that to Coach, and he carried it on to us. And I am very appreciative. And when Coach was about to pass away, I received a message that he would not be long for this world. And I was invited to go up and see him at the hospital. And so I grabbed Karen, my wife, now of 53 years. And I said, Karen, we got to get up and see Coach. He's not long for the world. We got to say goodbye to him. We jumped in the car and we're driving up the 405 freeway to get to UCLA. And I'm thinking, what do I say to a man who's meant so much to me and taught me so many good things about life? So I freed up my mind, walked in the door, and there was Coach in bed. He was alert enough to see us, and he could hear us. He wasn't speaking at that time. And I said, Coach, this is Team Vallely. You know, the one that the team you put together some, 40 years ago, plus years ago, when I was the stupid little basketball brat that was going off to play for the Atlanta Hawks. And Coach, I just wanted to come up here and I wanted to thank you for helping me make that decision. Before I could ask the question of you, Coach, should I marry this girl? You stuck your finger in my chest. Before I could ask that question, you said, you marry that girl. And I said, Coach, I always thought that if Karen had had a jump shot and could play, she would have played ahead of me on the UCLA Bruins team because she had so much character. You identified with her. You helped me make that decision as a young 21-year-old. And I said, Coach, the other thing I want to thank you for is all that you taught me in the Pyramid of Success and the way to live life. He looked up at Karen and me, and we all held hands. And he said, I love you. And we never saw him again.
Wow.
Wow.
You contracted non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2003. And I know you said those were dark days for you. At your darkest, you contacted Coach Wooden. And didn't he give you motivation to continue the fight when you were about ready to give up?
Oh, I'm not sure I ever had. Well, the time when I was about to give up, I wasn't speaking to anybody. I was in the Hutchinson Cancer Center in Seattle, and they'd given me radiation and chemotherapy, and my mouth was raw. I couldn't eat. I was being fed by a tube, and I was in and out of real consciousness. I was on substantive painkillers, but Coach, we talked several times during that ordeal, as we did when we lost my daughter too, who also fought a 2.5-year fight. And his encouraging word would just be that, something simple like God has a plan for each of us, and we're all pulling for you and hope everything goes well. And that was more it than anything else. It wasn't particularly spiritual.
But he gave you, and he was an impetus for you to move on. And
Absolutely. Well, and his force was in the form of the pyramid again.
Yeah.
Be your best when your best is needed. Control what you can control. Well, the only thing we can control is I have this wonderful wife who's with me the whole time, following what the drugs are that they're giving me, asking questions of the doctors and nurses, the PAs, and making sure that the insurance is doing what they're supposed to do and keeping in contact with the community around us that was praying for me. And it was just that all the team that was put together is a fantastic experience. Even though it didn't work up at the Hutch in Seattle, and we ended up down at MD Anderson in Texas, in Houston, for my second transplant, I always felt that there were people around that were flooding me with this help and love, and a particular great experience for me is in the second transplant when I was using somebody else's cells. Mr. Hofmeister from Germany, he donated 5 million stem cells, they put them in a plastic bag, brought them over to me. They wiped me out again in Houston, and I went down to the bottom again. And my prayer went something like, God, what do you want me to know about this? I mean, is this the time that I leave Karen and she will have lost her daughter and her husband? Or is there something else that I need to know? Because at that point, being a faith-driven person that I was, I could just leave and go to heaven. Or I could stay if I was needed in some way. And it came in the prayer, like you get when you contemplate things, depending on your faith way. I heard from God, what are you thinking about, John? I said, well, I'm thinking about all the people around me that have helped me and prayed for me. I would get calls from Kareem or from Steve Patterson or, Mike Warren or Lucius. Andy Hill was very instrumental in keeping people speaking to me when they could. And I'm thinking about all those people, God. He said, well, what do you think about all those people? I said, I think I should be praying for their well-being and for their hope and for their carrying on with a life that is special. And when I started to do that prayer for all the people around me, I was lifted like you can't imagine. I could not get out of bed. I wasn't eating. I was stuck at the very bottom. I had watched the stem cells drip into my system through apheresis from Mr. Hofmeister, and I didn't know if it was going to work or not. But in that prayer, I had great hope, and I don't think there's much more you can ask for. I'm not going to say that's the reason I was cured, but I'm just telling you what happened to me.
Yeah, it's an amazing story.
It is indeed. To think of the adversity that you're going through. I mean, death is about the biggest game you can play, and it seemed to even strengthen your marriage and strengthen you as a person. Instead of hurting you, it made you stronger.
Oh, Billy, you sound like a preacher now.
Oh, I'm anything but, John.
I know your background, Billy. I've read about you, and but you did right. Rephrase what you just said again, so I can share that.
The adversity that you faced.
Yeah.
Usually when somebody faces that kind of adversity, especially somebody married, it can either wreck your marriage or it can make it stronger. In your case, it inevitably made it stronger, but it seemed to make you stronger as a person as well, facing that adversity.
No, you're dead right on that. And I immediately flow from this comment between the two of us to my daughter, who passed away as a 12-year-old. She wanted to live so badly. Why do I have to die, she asked me. Will I live until Christmas? 2 questions that came to me on a drive home. And I said to her, I don't know if I'm going to live until Christmas. But I do know this, we all have to die. But I said to her, Erin, one thing I know, if our faith is true, and by the way, her hero is God, then we're going to end up in a place in heaven, and we're going to see each other again. And it's going to be phenomenal. There'll be no chemo, there'll be no radiation. There'll be just nothing but happiness and peace. And so when it came time for me to go through it, having lost a daughter who was in heaven, I thought, what the heck? The worst that's going to happen to me is I'm going to be in heaven with God and see my daughter again. So I actually had the lighter of the two, a much lighter of the two sentences. Aaron had to go off at a very young age. But imagine by faith believing that something as good as getting to see your daughter again in heaven would be phenomenal. I did see her in a dream about 3 months after she passed. It was as vivid as I can see looking out the window to the bay here on the island, Balboa Island. And I walked in a room with my wife to see the physician who had cared for her. For some reason, we were meeting. And in the side door, when she opened the door, she walked in, and it was as vivid as I could be personally 2 feet from you right now. And she didn't say anything. There was just a glow that said, look, everything's good. Get on with it. Everything is perfect. So with that idea and having the hope that heaven is real, then I was able to carry forward in spite of anything that would come my way. If Erin could fight it and did it the way she did and give it her all, I could too.
John, let me ask you a question, because I believe that, dreams, people come to us in dreams, and that's their way of visiting us. Now, was Erin, how old was Erin in that dream? Was she 12 years old, or had she matured into a lady that she...
No, excellent point. She was in a outfit that was in her, probably right in the year that she passed, with a look on her face that penetrated like you can't believe.
Wow. Wow. So that brings us to, my close friend for 40 years, Rod Carew, and you have traveled similar paths. You both lost daughters. You both have suffered almost debilitating life tragedies. How did you meet Rod? And tell me about the time we all got together for dinner at Coach Wooden's. But first, tell me about Rod and your relationship with Rod and how it has grown over the years.
Rod and I met as a result of him joining with the Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation to start a golf tournament down here in Orange County. And we just spent some time together, and we just really meshed nicely in our conversation. We had huge love for our kids, and Rod really wanted to make a difference in the name of his daughter, and I wanted to do the same. And so we just did things that changed the world for these kids that have to fight cancer. We just were very disturbed that there wasn't answers yet. Since those days when we first met, suddenly we've moved from approximately overall a 40% survival rate for these kids to about 90%.
Holy
and so
mackerel.
we feel like we've made a big difference in a real life experience. We're not taking all the credit for this. We're just saying that we focused on investing our time and money, resources in trying to make a better place for the kids. And that has panned out. I always love Coach Wooden's statement about that. When you win the national championship, I remember going in the locker room and all he had to say to us was, "Great job, guys. Now don't go out and make fools of yourselves." So Rod and I would not take any credit except for making the effort to add to a better life for others.
Yeah, you used your celebrity in a positive way.
I think, especially Rod, he's, the golf tournament has produced great amounts of money. That's actually been in place longer than the Dribble for the Cure event that I do. I think he's in his 25th year.
25th, 26th year coming up.
Tell us more about Dribble for the Cure. Tell us some more about that, John. Dribble for the Cure. Tell our audience what that's more about.
Well, Dribble for the Cure started 14 years ago. I guess we're going into our 14th year coming up. And I went over to USC to watch Dribble for the Cure that was actually organized by the coach over there. I'm embarrassed to not remember the name of the coach, who's such a nice guy. He's down at
Morrison?
No, after him. He was fired from USC during the debacle with the great football star that was there. This man had nothing to do with the debacle that took place.
So it was roughly 2005?
Yes.
Derek, can you look up the USC basketball coach in 2005 and while John continues with the story?
And, see, 5, it would have been, it's about a little bit later than that. Oh, gosh, he's down in Texas.
Well, Derek will look it up.
Okay.
Tim
Anyway,
Floyd.
I saw you, Tim Floyd, you got it. Ooh, Derek, you're good. So, yeah, Tim Floyd, one of the nicest guys you'd ever run into, coaching USC. We got together at my house. He came down to Newport, and we talked, and I went up and saw the event, and I said, why am I not doing this at UCLA? They didn't have as big of an event as we end up having at UCLA, maybe because our basketball support is larger than SC's, but I said I could do that, and I went over and I talked to the athletic director and ended up putting together the Dribble for the Cure at UCLA. It became a hit right away, and now we've raised a little over, I think it's close to $2 million doing Dribble for the Cure. And the kids, we'll get 1,000 kids that sign up, and then they'll make teams, and they'll go out and get sponsors and that sort of thing. And so we might have 25 or 30 teams that go and dribble out around the campus on a 1-mile course. They'll come back into the Poly Pavilion. They'll get to meet on that, dribbling around the campus, the men's and women's basketball teams. The track team will come out and walk with us. The volleyball team comes out and walks with us. Corey Close and her basketball team, of course, the girls are really supportive of the event. So we try to get the students on campus to join as well. And we get sponsorship from all over. And a couple of alums were great in the early sponsorship. Eddie Sheldrake, who's still living at, I think, 95 years old. And Jerry Norman, who was an assistant coach for Coach Wooden, has been a sponsor for many, many years, as well as others. And so it just became a great event in supporting kids. And the kids have a great time meeting these great basketball stars, the athletes at UCLA. The athletes get to go and do something for somebody else, and without expectation of something in return. The greatest gift, as Coach Wooden would say. And we've just made a real hit out of it. Then, after the success at UCLA, first it was with, oh God, this mind is so bad. Anyway,
We're all in the same boat, John.
Anyway, Lavin took over. Steve Lavin, who just took a job down in San Diego, I guess, and he became the coach at UCLA. We became friends when he took over, and he wanted to continue the Dribble for the Cure. Forget how it ended up at St. John's, but he went to St. John's. I called Steve up. I said, Steve, you've seen Dribble for the Cure. Let's do it at St. John's. He said, let's do it. We got a hold of the athletic director. They liked the idea. You know, this somewhat religious school could do something for others with Dribble for the Cure. So they're in about their 10th year, I think, now. And so together, the two projects have raised, like I said, almost right around $2 million.
That's great.
And now they're joining, now the PCRF, Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation, is joining with the V Foundation to add additional universities. So we'll see how that pans out.
The V Foundation's for Jimmy Valvano.
Yes.
Yep. So I would be remiss if I didn't have to ask you about the 1970 championship game, NCAA championship game, Jacksonville versus UCLA. What do you remember about that game? I remember that we jumped out to a pretty big 9-point lead, I guess, 8 minutes into the game. And, well, why don't you tell me from your point of view what happened?
Well, I certainly remember that you were jumping out to a 9-point lead. And I remember that we were trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do with Artis Gilmore, because he clearly had a huge physical advantage down low. Even though he didn't shoot well that night, we had Sidney Wicks fronting Artis down low, And about with 5 or 6 minutes left in the first half, we were down by the 9 points. We went to a full court press, created several turnovers, opened up a couple of fast breaks where we went down and made shots. And I think by halftime, we were up by 4 or 5 points. And so then we started to gain that confidence again.
Well, let me stop you, because didn't you say Coach Wooden in the timeout when I interviewed you for Jacksonville Who, you said Coach Wooden was at not so much at a loss, but Sydney suggested he front artist, and
you're stealing my stories, Frank.
Then I will keep quiet.
That was the next step. Sydney was playing in front. The ball was getting thrown over the top, even though Sydney could jump and, do anything a guy 6'9", 235 pounds, built like Superman could do. Artis was getting, we couldn't really stop him from getting his shots in that first half. He says, "Coach, let me try playing behind him." And so instead of fronting, he started to play behind Artis, and we fronted, I can't remember who, I think we put Steve Patterson front
I think you put Steve Patterson in front and Sydney behind him.
And so Steve 6'9", was a really good player, but not a great jumper. So Artis would get the ball on several occasions in that first half, towards the end there of the half. And when Artis went up for his little jump shot, it was shooting down at the basket. So Sydney went up between Artis and the basket. And when we all got together, Frank, as you remember, with Coach and Rod Carew and all together that one time at Andy Hill's, Artis restated the fact that Sydney was goaltending his shot. Now, if Artis could have dunked the ball in those days, it would have been a different story, because everybody would have been thrown into the basket, including Sydney. But because Sydney was able to go up from behind and block the shot, especially when it was perhaps on its downward move, then we put a stop to the inside game of Jacksonville.
So perhaps Lew Alcindor helped you win that game as well, because the dunk was banned as a way to control Lew Alcindor.
Aren't these events great? So I would have never won that next championship with my buddies on the 1970 team unless Lew Alcindor had been so great to get the dunk banned. And that's why we won the 70 championship. I love that story.
You said it, not me. You said it, not me.
That's awesome. And next time I see Kareem, I got to tell him that. I got to tell him that story. That's a good one.
Dribble for the cure.
Well, hang on a second. So
I'm sorry.
Let's continue with it.
Go ahead.
You had a great tournament as well. You were named the 1970 NCAA championship all-tournament team. But we then we had dinner with Coach Wooden. I think you and Andy Hill auctioned off a dinner with Coach Wooden in 2002 or 3 or so. And I said to Rod, we're going to have to win this dinner. So we'll all invite a couple of people. So I invited artists to appear, come from Jacksonville. Vaughn Wedeking, who was your counterpart at Jacksonville, was a great player who passed young early. He passed at 52 years old. And we had a great dinner with Coach Wooden. The thing I remember most about that is Coach wanted to talk baseball with Rod most of the night. But he had his favorite dinner, chicken with blueberry pie, and it was a great, memorable night.
That was a great night. Coach's favorite sport was baseball. He loved the mental requirement in pitching, in catching, in placing people on the field, and all of the mental responsibility a coach had. I think he loved that. So much went on during the game in baseball, maybe versus basketball. Where basketball, we had to prepare so much mentally and physically. But baseball seemed to be more of a mental game, even though the athletes are phenomenal in baseball. I'm not taking that away from any player that can play professional baseball. But you love talking the game with guys. And of course, Rod is a intellect as well when it comes to talking about baseball, having been around it his entire life and all the things that he achieved. So a lot of the conversation was listening to those two guys talk. It was fun.
Yeah.
However, Artis Gilmore made a big point that Jacksonville University probably would have won the national championship if Sidney hadn't goaltended his shots. And my comment was simply, well, the rules are the rules. We play by the game. The officials call the game the way they do. And Artis, he came in second that night. He is the nicest guy in the world. We laughed. We had fun. Von Redican was there. It was great to see him. I didn't really know him hardly at all. And super smart guy. I think he was a dentist.
A dentist in Portland, Oregon. Yep.
Became a dentist and a super nice guy. Just great conversation with a bunch of people who had great experiences in life.
Yeah, they shared one moment in time.
Exactly.
And it was a great moment for us, and it was a great moment for you.
Absolutely.
And you are also a Hall of Fame beach volleyball player. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's good and possibly bad. It's growing up at the beach, surfing. I surfed for 50 years, and I loved the atmosphere on the beach. I mean, all the girls in the sunshine and the requirements for athleticism in deep sand. I started playing volleyball when I was about 15, and of course I was growing at the time like crazy. And so by the time I was, I think I was 18 or 19 when Ron Von Hagen, who was the biggest name in the sport of two-man beach volleyball, asked me to play with him. Of course, I was honored, and it was like stepping onto the floor with Lew Alcindor as far as getting a chance to play with him. So I loved playing the game, but I don't think it was good for my knees. I was a pretty good jumper in those days. I could get up in the air, and I could hit the ball, and I could even rebound the ball once in a while and shoot the jump shot. But I was taking cortisone when I was at UCLA.
Wow.
Each year I had to take cortisone shots in my knees. And I could continue on at that point, but I think had I not played beach volleyball during my UCLA years, maybe my basketball would have been better on a longer-term basis. But then again, would you trade those beach volleyball wins, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa, every single event on the West Coast, Ron Von Hagen and I won. And that was one of the goals that I had. And so I was lucky to get to do that.
So your knees worked against you when you were the #1 draft choice of the Atlanta Hawks. Do you think your knees worked against you, and it cost you 4, 5, 6 years more years?
I have no idea, because you have to be in the right place at the right time. Right. In that business. I do think it worked against me. Anytime your knees are in pain and you're having to try to keep up with athletes that are actually better athletes than you are, it's a tough call. I could still shoot the ball and everything, but I played in Atlanta for the Hawks behind Walt Hazzard and Pistol Pete. Maravich was ahead of me, and so I forget who the other guys on the team were. There were 4 guards that were pretty darn good at the game. And so I played against behind a couple of big names there. And then when I went to the Houston Rockets, I was playing behind Calvin Murphy, who was a big star at the time, and Stu Lance, who had a great NBA career, and a fellow named Mike Newland. All those guys played, I think, 12 years or 10, something like that. So I was maybe in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when I got cut from Houston, I thought, you know what? This pro sport thing is not as much fun as it was before. I had made some really good money because I was a high draft choice, and I was very blessed because of that, and saved every dollar that we made so that I could start private business when I finished. And I was just very fortunate to get out of it what I did. Then I had one more year in Brussels, Belgium. I was invited to go over and be a player coach in the International Basketball Association, started by some entrepreneurs here in America. And we went over there with 10 players, each team. I think there was 5 franchises in Israel and Brussels, where I was, and in Germany. I don't think we had a team in France to make any difference, but I got to play and coach a team over there that did quite well. And I had many of the players that had been just cut from the NBA. And so that was a lot of fun. Oops, I think I goofed here.
No, you're okay.
You're good.
Fine.
You're okay.
You still got me?
Yes,
yeah.
sir. We got you.
We got you.
Okay.
We got you.
I'm not going to worry about it then.
Don't worry about it. So that's an interesting that you could have maybe played a few more years, but it would if you didn't play beach volleyball. But those beach volleyball memories played a great part in your life and made you a diversified person as well.
Absolutely. So many great relationships. Great relationships were created from that experience. I think an example of a guy that I always admired was Keith Erickson, who played for the Lakers for a long time. He was a phenomenal volleyball player as well.
As was Wilt.
Huh?
As was Wilt.
No, Wilt was not.
I mean, Wilt was tall.
Wilt was tall, and he had very long arms. And if you set Wilt properly, there is no way anybody was going to dig the ball in a game of volleyball. We used to do a little exhibition team which included Wilt and Keith Erickson and myself, Larry Rundle, who was one of the best players in volleyball ever. We had this team that used to go around and play 6-man. So it'd be 4 against 6, but Wilt was our star on the team, and he was the draw. It was a way to pick up a couple bucks in the summertime. And Wilt was an absolute character, of course, but he couldn't pass the ball. He couldn't set the ball. And one of my good friends at 6'1" loved playing against Wilt because he said Wilt can't block.
Wow.
In other words, Wilt would go up and he didn't know how to move his hands properly or move his arms. If he could get up, and block a ball, it was sometimes an accident as far as this guy was concerned. So we always used to kind of make fun behind Wilt's back that, as much as he loved the beach and the girls and maybe a party, Wilt was participating because of his love of the environment. Again, same thing that I think I was there for, just to enjoy this great environment and get to do something athletically on the beach.
So Wilt really didn't start playing volleyball until he started playing for the Lakers, right? He moved to the beach. That's when he started becoming interested in volleyball?
Yes, that is absolutely right. He ended up down in Santa Monica at the beach. He meets a guy named Gene Selznick, who was one of the heroes of old-time volleyball. And Gene was a character, too. He was kind of he was our general manager. And so Wilt was on this team, and so Toshi Toyota was on it. Ronnie Lang played once in a while, I think. Anyway, we had basically 5 guys would show up and play this exhibition, sort of a game against 6 men, whatever the local group put together. And it was quite fun. But after playing several events, there I am playing beach volleyball on the weekends. I'm doing an exhibition during the week someplace. And I decided that, I'm a national champion. This is after we won the 1969 championship. And I'm a national champion in basketball, and now I'm winning all the beach volleyball tournaments, so I'm somebody. So I go to Gene Selznick, and I said, Gene, I think I should make more than $100 a night. Because Wilt would go after the match was over straight to the box office.
Wait a second. I'm going to invalidate that 1970 championship. Then I'm going to present it to Jacksonville because you were making $100 and you were an NCAA. That was an NCAA violation.
So this is just a story, Frank. This is a story.
Nice try, Frank.
Okay.
You'll have a hard time proving this. Anyway, so I went to Selznick and I said, Gene, I think I should make more than $100. This was after the senior year. It wasn't after the junior. It was after the senior year.
Gotcha.
Now, make sure you write that down properly, Frank. And so anyway, I went to Gene. I said, I need to make something more than that. I think I should be making $400 a night. $400 a night would only be, say 20% of the gross that we're taking in, or maybe a little bit more. But, I am who I am. He says, let me go talk to Will about that. I'll get back to you. A week later, he comes back to me. He says, John, I presented to Wilt your proposal. And his response was, we don't need John anymore. So even though I had a hand in starting professional volleyball, I didn't last long in it. Nobody was making money on beach volleyball back in those days. It didn't happen until several years after I was done. So,
wow. The yellow sheet on you, John, when I was doing some research on you, it says you dribbled with your left hand and shot with your right hand, which strikes me as you were ambidextrous, basically. I mean, nobody can dribble with their left hand and can't dribble with their right. And if you shoot with your right, obviously, I mean, was volleyball help you be that two-handed player? I mean,
well, I think volleyball helps you be very aware of everything that's around you, like is required on the basketball court. For some reason, my left hand was more comfortable dribbling the ball. I seemed to have more control over it. I could do a little crossover dribble. I could do a change of pace, change of direction type of thing with my left hand. For some reason, I wasn't as comfortable with the right. But the one thing I know, when I shot the jump shot, I liked going to my left and popping up real quick and shooting over the top of the person that was guarding me. So in order to be at the level of many of the other players I played against, would have had to been a better dribbler with my right hand. Oh, I could do it, but I don't know. Coach Wooden and Denny Crum during my senior year at UCLA were trying to figure out how to speed me up, so they had me just dribble up and down the court, on the side court, just as fast as I could. And Denny Crum actually timed me because they felt I was a little too slow. And so while I had skill in shooting and skill in understanding the game and would play a little bit of defense, I didn't have as much athletic power as many of the other guys that probably I played against.
Who's the toughest guy you ever guarded, John?
Oh, God. Well, Jerry West is pretty hard to guard. In fact, impossible to guard because he could really get up quick with his jump shot. I got stuck with Oscar Robertson once or twice.
and Oscar was 6'5", or so, wasn't he?
6'5", yeah. No, he took me down one time I'll never forget it, in Milwaukee when they had that championship team. They ran a play, and my old teammate Lew Alcindor's playing on defense, and so I'm trying to guard somebody, and Lew says, "Watch out, John, it's coming your way." And I ended up on the left side guarding Oscar. So here's the 6'5" guy backing me down, and he's 215 or 20 pounds, backing this 180 pound guy at 6'5", backs me down, just turns around and shoots the ball back, a little bank shot. Jerry West did the same thing in the form to me. And but then there were some quick guys that were no fun to guard. Not Iverson. It was way before that. I can't remember all the names. I'm sorry about that.
What was Pistol Pete like?
Oh my God. Well, this is a story that would this is a long story, you guys.
Yeah, let's have it.
Well, Pistol was a phenomenal athlete, and we met as rookies in rookie camp and enjoyed playing together. I think I didn't like guarding Pistol. It was hard to guard him. He's a tremendous athlete, could really dribble the ball, and was a pretty good shooter at that time. I would say not a great shooter, but he was. But anyway, the whole sport was around Pistol, and the Pistol, I'll never forget, in rookie camp we were rooming together too. They put us together. Pistol, I think, was the second or third pick that year, and and I was farther down the line. And so he said to me, he says, "John," he says, "what was it about UCLA?" He says, I always wanted to win a championship. I never won a championship. What was it about UCLA that caused you guys to win so much? And I just immediately went, oh, Pistol, you have no idea. And I started to try to explain to him, first of all, Pistol, we never talked about winning. We never talked about losing. We talked about things like teamwork, eagerness to sacrifice personal interests for the glory of the unit, the team, and loyalty and cooperation. So as I was sharing these concepts with him, he started to mumble them a little bit. Like, you know, it meant he never heard that kind of thinking. And so it was interesting to share with him what it was like to be on a championship team where the culture was so good, and yet he had come from a culture where it was all about him. He really was, Pistol was a circus animal. I think of him as a circus animal. And so talented. The fastest guy I ever saw from the end line to the other end line. Whoa. He could outrun anybody. Herm Gilliam, who was extremely fast, he could beat Herm by a full step from one end to the other. So with that athleticism, it was really something. And then later on in my life, I was talking to Coach Wooden about Pistol, and he said, yeah, Coach went down to speak at a camp down in the South, and Pistol's father, can't remember his first name.
Press Maravich.
Press and Coach were talking, and Coach Wooden said to Press, what you're doing with your son, the way you're coaching and developing him, you're creating a monster. And Press said to Coach, oh no, I'm creating the first $1 million player in the NBA. So obviously there was a big difference in the approach to how Press would coach, who coached Pistol at LSU, and how Coach Wooden would have coached Pistol. Pistol came to UCLA. They brought the team up. LSU came up to play us, or out to play us. And we couldn't wait to play against them. Henry Bibby and I were the guards at the time. And we ended up going ahead by, I think, 30 or so, or 40 points. And Pistol was having a tough night because we were guarding him pretty good. And he, in the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, all of our bench was playing, he scored like 20 points. So it made it look like with him scoring 24 points that night that he had had this great night, but not so great.
Well, what's the best? I got to ask you, what the basketball back there? Is that the 69 game, the 70 game, or is that a pro game, the basketball that you have behind you?
That was a college game that I just mentioned to you, that I just shared with you. My experience with the Atlanta Hawks is Pistol had a really tough time. There was great dissension on the Atlanta Hawks at that time. We had Lou Hudson, great star in the NBA. Bill Bridges was a forward. He was in his 10th year, I think. And there were all kinds of issues between the veterans, all of us, and Pistol. And I was a roommate of Pistol. And Pistol liked to go out and have a good time. And, you know, he would go out and come back at 3 a.m. sometimes. And one night he came in and he was pretty messed up. And Pistol kind of had I said, Pistol, it's 3 a.m. and you're coming in, and he turns the lights on. He starts packing his bag. We have to leave around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. I said, Pistol, turn the light off and get into bed, get some rest. Come on. He says, come on, let's fight. He said, you're nothing but a nigger lover. And I said, oh, come on, Pistol, give me a break. I'm in bed, you know. So I got out of bed. I went down to Lou Hudson and Bill Bridges. They were rooming together, and Bill Bridges was our captain. I said, guys, I just had this experience with Pistol. I don't know what to do. He said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And something else had happened between them and Pistol that day. So Pistol had come in having had a little alcohol and was crazy. And so I moved out into another room, and I think I ended up rooming with Jimmy Davis at that point, who was a really cool guy. No longer with us, unfortunately. But and they had to deal with pistol. It was just really a dark experience.
Yeah. Well, Derek, in closing, I want to ask Derek if he's got a question, because Derek's got an apparel company in Los Angeles. He may have a question or something he want to ask you about that.
Yeah, I'm coming to your house and we're gonna have a meeting about that. Just kidding. But that is cool. I'd be curious to hear about that, but we probably shouldn't put that in the show. I have a question about the pyramid. It seems like would you say it's sort of like an operating system for life? Is that how you would?
Absolutely, Derek. I mean, I'm doing a talk, I think it's on April 29th, to a bunch of women who have supported the Hoag Hospital Foundation. It's called the Circle 1000. People that have been major donors for, 25 or 30 years. And I get to go speak to these women. And one of the things I'm going to present, I always present the pyramid of success and how valuable it's been for me. And so I look forward to sharing with them that all this talk about K through 12 and what we're teaching our kids, whether it be gender identity or racism or all this crap, is useless. If we were to teach the pyramid of success in terms that would fit K through 12, which admittedly K is going to be more difficult, but if you were to train people with Coach Wooden's pyramid of success each year, instead of wasting time on all this foolishness and division, and we tried to teach people to find their personal best, knowing that not one of us is like another. That's one of the things I loved about Coach Wooden's story, too, is that it was always, nobody's like you. Find your personal best. Be inspired by getting peace of mind about your effort. And if you've done that, you don't have to worry about the results. Bad things are going to happen to all of us. Good things are going to happen to us. But follow a storyline, follow a motivational tool that can help you through all kinds of challenge and change. And so I always look forward to sharing at least this in that short term. And then I use it in my application in fighting disease with my daughter and also my own disease, how I used all the terms in the pyramid of success to get along, work with the doctors, work with the culture that you're developing, whether it's business, sport, marriage, or otherwise. And so, yes, I find this as a foundational tool for living life. Add to that faith that God has a plan for you, and there's an experience that He has complete control of, none of us knowing when we come into the world or when we're going to go out of the world. It's simply to make the best we can of what we got. So what's wrong with all these characteristics? Why don't we just use those and stop all this foolishness?
Got it. And another question I had, because just thinking about the application of this pyramid, how is this implemented? Because, sort of like an interface, you got young guys coming from various backgrounds, various educational backgrounds as well. What does a guy know about, an 18, 19-year-old kid? What does he know about self-control and loyalty and enthusiasm? I mean, some of those things are kind of evident, but other things, some of those phrases, people don't have background examples of that. So how did Coach Wooden express examples of that kids could grasp?
The tool, the 15 characteristics that Coach Wooden put into the pyramid of success, those characteristics were studied by Coach Wooden. He shoveled different vocabulary words in and out for 14 years, trying to find the answer so that he could talk to a parent of a student who wondered why his or her child got a B instead of an A or a C instead of an A. And Coach would always respond when he got this all under his mind, in mind, that your child may be fantastic at math, Your child may be great at English. I'm teaching English here. Your child may become some great sport person or creative artist. I only want to try to help your child be the best he can be in this subject of English. When they go to math, they have to go through this again. How could have I done this? I would have had to have teachers and mentors from the very beginning talking about these simple characteristics in terms that they could relate to. Would they get it? Not necessarily. But doesn't it seem valid that learning skill, learning what team spirit means, self-control, alertness, initiative, friendship? I mean, could go on with story after story in each of these characteristics in my life and what I learned. So what would you put in its place, I would ask. And I would encourage any coach, and I know many teachers and coaches are using the Pyramid of Success, to dive into this. I spoke to Orange Coast College this year about this, and I had people from very different backgrounds in that room. And they loved the idea of it's not about your race, it's not about any education that you had in the past, it's about you finding your personal best to become the best you're capable of becoming. And these kids in this college, they had a terrible year. But I know that day they were asking the kind of questions that were absolutely valid for their life at that time. How you get and reach the younger kids, I got a copy of the pyramid down here that's for young kids. I don't have it here, so I won't go grab it for you. But it's on the wall here in the man cave. And I truly believe that we could start at a very low level teaching kids this sort of thing. I think gender identity will come out later. Maybe they can figure it out for themselves. I hate the idea that because somebody is from a different race, that there would be some sort of misunderstanding between different races. And again, I find this is the glue. When I look at the Pyramid of Success and adaptability, sincerity, honesty, reliability, this is the glue that holds the 15 characteristics together: integrity and patience. Being alert to weakness. I mean, fighting with each other over things that are not useful makes no sense to me. Self-control is so important. And one of the biggest ones I use when I talk to younger people is initiative. Cultivating the ability to make decisions and think alone. Not follow the crowd when you don't need to. I mean, we're losing, 10,000 people a year to fentanyl overdose. That's not a good decision to try a pill like that. And if you don't know what's in that pill, we need to say no. So I'm simply saying that I love this. And intentness, which is to finish the job. My job is to continue with what I've learned and how I can share it with others, having learned it from one of the greatest teachers. Not the greatest coach, because I can't talk about that, but one of the great teachers of all time. Coach preferred the term teacher over coach. Teaching people how to make a better life for themselves.
Got it. And then
John?
one more statement is, so you said Coach Wooden was about 5'9"?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's the perfect height. Appreciate that.
That's how tall Derek is.
Eric, that must be your height. I knew that without even asking the question.
Well, John, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It was a real pleasure to meet you. And you didn't really give us basketball lessons, volleyball lessons. You gave us life lessons, and certainly, you learned them from the teacher himself. And we certainly appreciate you passing them on to us.
And in closing, how you hitting them?
I'm shooting in the middle to low 80s.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course you are.
I only play once every week. I used to get to play in the earlier years 3 or 4 times a week when I had several different business interests that allowed me time to get out there. But the body is not what it used to be. I went through a terrible shingles experience. My right arm really got messed up. But anyway, that's another story. And I still love playing the game. I can't wait to watch the Open that's taking place right now on TV today. I love watching that game.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, John. You've been a great guest, and we really, really, really appreciate you making time for us today.
My pleasure, Frank. Love you, Frank, and nice to see you, Billy. And I can identify with some of your history, Billy. Not all of it.
Well, thank God I wasn't on the beach back then, John.
I'm not going to spit out any more than that. And Derek, thanks for controlling the show and let me be part of it.
Great. Thanks so much, John.
Hey, guys. Take care.
Good guy. Good
yeah,
guy.
Remarkable guy.
He
remarkable.
Was a great guest. He was a terrific fella, and he taught us a lot about Coach Wooden and what was going on with him and how he was how he affected his life, and he's still affecting lives today.
Yeah, well, both him and Rod, had gone through that awful, awful thing. Every parent's nightmare that they lose a child. I think the Arabs, I had said this once before, that the Arabs have this curse. It's the worst thing you could say to somebody. And it doesn't sound that bad. It said, may you outlive your children.
Yeah, well,
which is a terrible, terrible thing to say to anybody. Yeah. But between him and Rod, they took this adversity and turned it around to do really great things.
Indeed. So with that, why don't we sign off for this week and say goodbye.
Say goodbye. Say goodbye, Billy. Say goodbye,
Say
Frank.
goodbye, Billy.
Derek,
goodbye, Derek.
My brother.
Adios.
Adios. Adios.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. And if you want to read more about that championship game, If These Lips Could Talk has a great, great chapter on it, and Wooden. And
there are a lot of books about
Coach Wooden. And there's a great chapter about Rod Carew, who will be our next guest as well.
Coming up next week, one of the most talented players to ever don a Major League uniform, Rod Carew.